Jiu-Jitsu shocked the world with its superpower of managing distance to keep yourself safe while working your way to submission. And in the 90s, submissions counted for over 50% of the finishes in MMA fights. But this was 30 years ago. And as we move into the early 2000s, the submission rate declines to 30%. And the decline continues as it starts to dip below 25% in 2011. And in 2023, that number is now 20%. Now, luckily for you and I, Alex watched 214 UFC matches in 2023, and he collected a lot of data. And when deciding how to document and organize certain data points, it can be a bit subjective. So he was a bit hesitant to release a PowerPoint summarizing his findings. But ultimately, we decided it was more important to get this data into the hands of our fellow nerds. So show your interest and help spread the word by liking this video. And when we reach 5,000 likes, I'll post the link to the PowerPoint in the description. And if you have any questions on the data, reach out to Alex using the contact information below. And let's start our dive into Alex's findings to discuss why we need to reframe how we use Jiu-Jitsu and MMA. Jiu-Jitsu is like magic, and it's become a foundational skill for any MMA athlete. And as more and more people develop their jiu-jitsu skills, it's becoming incredibly dangerous to be on the bottom of an MMA fight. This graph shows the position where the fight was finished from on the ground. And the guard is relatively low on that list, coming in at 5.7%. And the most popular submission was the rear naked choke, which happens from the back. So maybe we can find a way to work our way to the back through our guard. But that happened a total of 0 times in 2023, and the guard player was knocked out 17 times trying to work their attacks. So if that's the case and I need to get to top position, I can use my guard to do that in the form of sweeps, reversals, or wrestle-ups, which is possible, and if you add up the sweeps, wrestle-ups, and reversals, you get a total of 30. But when you compare that to 433 successful takedowns, the sweep doesn't seem very likely. But I'll tell you right now, bro, anyone who tries to take me down is getting guillotined. And maybe you're right, and you'll be one of the 10 times a takedown was countered with a guillotine or another submission from the front headlock. Now, I'm no mathematician, but good luck. My point is, if we want to have repeated success using jiu-jitsu in an MMA context, we're gonna need a mindset shift. Just because jiu-jitsu people are nerds doesn't mean we have to be put. We can use our jiu-jitsu to help us knock people out. And in fact, 7% of all the fights were finished with a TKO from the ground. And we don't have the number, but you have to imagine a lot of these rounds that resulted in judges' decision victories were a result of dominant ground performance. But a dominant performance in MMA looks a lot different from jiu-jitsu. Something like the closed guard is a very slow position in both MMA and jiu-jitsu. But the difference is, in jiu-jitsu, the top player is likely to get a stalling call. But in MMA, if you're on the bottom in closed guard, that's a round that you're likely going to lose, which means you're probably going to be on the losing end of a decision. So the best guard for MMA is going to be the one that allows you to stand up. And the safest way to do so is probably going to be some form of open guard. But a lot of people try to stand up from half guard, which offers quite a lot of back exposure and can be a bit risky. Now, maybe it's risky from a jiu-jitsu perspective, but in MMA, it kind of makes perfect sense. Because if you just stay in bottom half guard, you're gonna lose the round for sure and probably the fight. And by trying to stand up, you do offer a bit of back exposure, which accounts for a lot of submissions, but no TKO finishes. So from the bottom person's perspective, either you're losing the round from bottom half guard or you're losing the round defending the back. But as long as you can defend the rear naked choke, you're gonna lose the round either way. So I think these numbers show us that in an MMA fight, it's worth the back exposure if it means you can stand up. And it's actually more risky to stay on your back and try and recover guard. So if this is our strategy from bottom position, we better be prepared to defend a lot of rear body locks, a lot of turtle, and a lot of front headlock. It's these positions that have the ability to change a fight. In jiu-jitsu, we spend a lot of time practicing finishing from the back. And if you take someone's back in MMA, sure, it would be nice to finish with a submission. But in reality, even if you're not able to finish the submission, that's a fight you're gonna win anyway. And even if you don't get all the way to the back and you just stay in half guard or hell, even close guard, that's a fight you're gonna win 9 times out of 10 as long as you just stay on top. There's no real incentive to prioritize passing the guard in MMA. The goal for both players is to just get on top and stay on top. So the bottom person's trying to stand up even if it offers back exposure. And what this leads to is a ton of front headlock, turtle, and rear body lock situations. And it's these positions that change the outcome of fights. There are a good amount of submissions that happen from the front headlock. And it's a position where you can pull a rabbit out of your hat and win a fight that you were supposed to lose, compared to something like a rear naked choke where you win a fight that you were already winning. The rear body lock is another great example of this. In Jiu-Jitsu, it's very common to see people pull guard to enter the legs and get the finish. But in the UFC, leg locks were typically initiated as a defense to the rear body lock. So the point is, if you're training Jiu-Jitsu for Jiu-Jitsu, it's different than training Jiu-Jitsu for MMA. If you're attacking the legs in MMA, you better make sure you break them down to a hip, because if you try and attack the legs of a standing opponent, it can be very risky. And it's the same for other martial arts as well. If you're training boxing, kickboxing, or Muay Thai, you have to account for takedowns in MMA, so the training's gonna be different. Same for judo, where a head and arm throw can work beautifully in a judo competition that rewards the amplitude of the throw. But that same throw can lead to you getting rolled through and on bottom position. But if you have a whizzer, it's more likely you're going to maintain top position after you complete the throw. And these types of insights are how we can start to modify the training of these specific martial arts and apply them in an MMA context. And for Jiu-Jitsu, I'd argue that these statistics show us that the guard is severely overrated, and so is the back.
Okay, so the perfect mount versus the perfect back control.
There's no question.
It's easy to see numbers like this and assume that we should be practicing our rear naked chokes from the back, because it's the most common submission. But out of 40 successful rear naked chokes, 21 of them happened because the bottom player was avoiding strikes from mount and gave up their back and an easy rear naked choke finish. So I think for MMA, you can very easily make a case that you don't need all these elaborate grip fighting sequences from the back and different ways of going about finishing a rear naked choke. What you should be spending your time on is getting on top and staying on top, making the mount a more vital position to your game, which means from these transition positions, it's probably not a good idea to chase the back. And we should be focused on breaking people down from the front headlock, returning people to the mat from the rear body lock, and holding them down. Jiu-Jitsu is still incredibly valuable to learn for MMA, but there's a difference between Jiu-Jitsu for sport and Jiu-Jitsu for MMA. Getting on top and staying on top is how you win an MMA match, either by decision, knockout, or the submission that falls into your lap because the bottom person is trying to stand up. So I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks again to Alex for supplying all the data. And if we hit 5,000 likes, you can check the description for the PowerPoint. And I'll see you all in the next video.